Idaho's Blind is about to start a series of interviews, and we're very fortunate to be able to interview Jonathan Mosen, who has recently moved to the United States from New Zealand. And so we want to hear about your experiences and your background. You were blind from birth?
That's right. Hi, Ramona. It's good to talk to you. Yes, I was blind since birth.
Okay. And so in New Zealand, did you go to public school or did you go to a school for the blind?
I went to a school for the blind initially for a few years, and then when I was 11, I went to public school for the rest of my career, but it was kind of a hybrid because they had a resource room there which was fully staffed by 2 teachers, so quite a few blind kids went to the public school that I went to.
But the resources in the resource room included what?
It was a place to put your Braille books. They would sometimes do transcription of handouts that got handed out at the last minute. They would provide advice to the teachers on how to make sure that the blind kids were fully integrated into the programs, that kind of thing.
And you had Braille books for most of your education?
I did. I was very fortunate in that regard. I'm a voracious Braille reader. Braille is something that I'm passionate about. And it also inspired me as an advocate when I learned of the story of Louis Braille and some of the barriers that he faced when trying to get other people to accept the genius of his code. Not many people realize that Braille, the man, was alive to see his books burned and banned at the School for the Blind, where he invented Braille and was teaching for a while until there was a change of heart. So that must have been heartbreaking for him and the other blind people.
It must have been, but they came back.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I think that it's fair to say that the people who have the most access to Braille become the best users as adults too. So I'm glad that you got that. And so I have the same questions about gadgets and radio. You grew up into that very young, I bet.
I have been on the radio since I was 4 years old, which means I've been on the radio for over 50 years now. And yes, I was always passionate about it. I listened to it a lot. I wanted to make it. And the only thing I wanted to do as a kid was to have a career in radio, which I ultimately did.
Well, good for you. And how did that get started?
Well, I was on the radio because I used to call into talk shows, and one day my parents got a telegram from the radio station, and they had this debate about which one of them should call the radio station back because they thought the radio station was going to tell them to make sure I ceased and desisted. But what they actually asked was, could I come into the studio to do this show for kids, talking about what they would like for Christmas and that kind of thing. So it was an annual Christmas tradition until I became an adolescent and not cute anymore. But then what happened was somebody saw this ad in the newspaper for a course in broadcasting, and they knew that I wanted to do this, and they said, you should apply for this. I was about 15 or 16. So I applied for the course. The short version is they said, yes, we'd love you to do the course. We'll even give it to you for half price because we think that Jonathan Mosen graduating from our course will be an advantage for the course. But the moment I said to them, well, I'll come in a little early and put a few Braille labels on things, and they learned I was a blind person, they told me to stop wasting their time because there was no way a blind person could work in radio. So I didn't do the course. And by the way, a few years later, when I was program director of a radio station, I became the boss of the person who wouldn't let me do the course. But that got me really determined. And the interesting thing is that I was pretty despondent about this. I mean, as a blind teenager, I was really depressed about the fact that I had worked out for myself that the problem I would face in life wasn't being blind. It was what other people thought of me being blind. And just as I was trying to come to terms with that, I got online with an old piece of technology called a dial-up modem and an old service called the CompuServe Information Service. And through that, I discovered the National Federation of the Blind and a whole bunch of people who'd worked this out long before me, that was the fundamental problem of blindness, the misunderstanding that exists. And if I hadn't found the National Federation of the Blind I don't think I'd be here. I don't think I would have survived that period in my life.
So this was in Auckland?
Yes, I was in Auckland at the
And
time.
that's the largest city in New Zealand?
Yes.
Yeah, so, and there were lots of places in the United States where you wouldn't have gotten that information very young either.
Right.
So we've seen a lot of change in our lifetimes.
I mean, we're just so fortunate. I'm so fortunate to have found the NFB at that critical time. And from then on, I was just determined to somehow get to an NFB convention. And I finally got a scholarship for young leaders so that I could go to my first NFB convention in Chicago in 1995. So it was a really big trip for me. And I met Dr. Kenneth Jernigan at that convention, who is one of the foremost civil rights leaders for the blind that there has ever been.
The 20th century, that's for sure.
Yeah, and to have met him after his writings and teachings had rescued me was a huge privilege for me.
So you were just a young fellow at that time, in 95?
In 95, yeah, I would have been about 25, 26 when I went to my first NFB convention. But somebody saw some talent in me, and I'd already been roped into our blindness organization in New Zealand. So they thought, well, since you're so enthusiastic, then go to this National Federation of the Blind thing and come back and tell us what it's about.
And then you got into international radio? Was that shortly afterward? Or?
Yeah, I started an internet radio station for the blind community because it came to me that if your local radio station, when you tune in the morning, kind of caters to your community and tells you what's going on in your geographical community, then the internet meant that we could do the same thing for the blind community globally. So it was an opportunity to have blind people come together and talk about our common challenges and opportunities and tips and tricks. And it was just, a lot of blind people love radio and audio, so using the internet to bring us all together from around the world was a really special thing.
Well, I imagine. And what was the name? You did a show, right?
Yeah, so I did a show called Blind Line, which was the first global call-in show for the blind community, and people used to call using very old, unreliable technology. We had a thing called buddy phone that we used for a while. It was so bad people called it buggy phone. And then probably the most famous thing from that period was a technology show called Main Menu. And the thing that made Main Menu special was, for the first time, it was a way for grassroots blind people to demonstrate and evaluate technology. So it was not people trying to sell you stuff, it was real world blind people actually saying, this is what works about a particular piece of technology and this is where it fails.
So where did Living Blindfully come in?
Living Blindfully was fairly recent. So I eventually became chief executive of New Zealand's largest employment agency for disabled people. And it was a really exciting opportunity, but it took me out of the blindness ecosystem to some degree. I was the only blind person in the company, and blind people were only one part of who we were catering to. And I wanted that connection. I wanted to retain that connection with my people, with blind people. So I started that podcast, and I started it pretty casually, for people who just wanted to check in with me, find out what I'm up to, but it really grew beyond my wildest imaginations, to the point that we had listeners in 113 countries. We were in the top 1% of listened to podcasts. And eventually, I actually, after 5 years, gave up the CEO role. I think, 5 years is enough in a CEO role. You've got all your ideas implemented. And it was a busy time anyway, because I led the organization through COVID and significant restructuring and contractual reform. And for a little while, I was doing Living Blindfully full time. We'd made it commercial. We had sponsors. We had subscribers who would pay for early access. And I was actually able to make a living out of Living Blindfully.
And you broadcast how often?
It was a weekly publication.
Weekly,
yeah.
Half hour?
Yeah, 2 hours every week.
2 hours every week.
Yeah.
Well, that's where I first heard of you. I heard of you through the National Federation of the Blind, but I heard of this Living Blindfully
See, I've heard of you for 40 years because you're like a legend.
Well, I'm
in
older
thing.
than you are too. But, I haven't concentrated on international things as much as some people, because I was busy,
Yeah.
raising kids and a career of my own and so forth.
For sure.
But some things get through to me anyway. So I definitely heard of this podcast, but when did you meet President Maurer?
President Maurer would have been my first NFB convention again in 1995. I mean, what I found about coming to conventions and other Federation events is that people are very welcoming. And so I also was at the 97 convention in New Orleans, which I enjoyed very much, especially since that was what turned out to be Dr. Jernigan's last banquet address. So I enjoyed that very much. And I've kept in touch with the Federation, and President Maurer and I kept in touch over the years on various projects.
Well, you developed a working relationship, would you say?
I think we
or more with President Riccobono.
We were acquainted. I mean, President Riccobono and I got to know each other very well. I mean, we've been on each other's radars for a long, long time.
Right.
But I think the big, development in our friendship was when he and I worked on a benefit concert for blind Ukrainian refugees just after the invasion, and somebody had come to me with this idea about having a concert, a global concert, kind of like Live Aid, for blind musicians, where we could raise money. And I thought, that's a good idea, I'd like to help with that. The NFB swung its considerable acumen and resources behind this project. And that's when I really got to see the internals of the NFB up close and started working with President Riccobono quite a lot. And I thought, these guys get stuff done. When they commit to something, it's really done well and it's done professionally. And I think that was, we kept in touch quite closely after that. President Riccobono was in New Zealand for a World Blind Union event. So my wife Bonnie and I hosted him for dinner. And he issued an invitation for me to speak at the 2023 National Convention. I did interview him for Living Blindfully, so we just kind of kept in touch. And then he had been thinking for a little while about what does all this changing technology mean for blind people, the fast changing pace of tech.
And how can we keep up with
it?
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, and he gave a very insightful banquet address back in 2017 talking about this, about the frenetic pace of technological change. So last year after convention, he sat down with me and said, so what will it take for you to come and join the organized blind movement? And I said, so are you talking about me moving to the United States? And we really, my wife and I had to have a serious think about that. It's a huge move, huge. But I don't think I would have done it for any other organization. I truly love this organization and what it stands for and what it's given to blind people, not just here, but around the world. And so I couldn't resist. It's been hard at times, but I'm glad.
Yeah. But your wife is originally from the United States?
Yeah, she was born in Georgia. She's also spent some time in Tennessee, worked for the Seeing Eye for a while, so she's lived in New Jersey. And then she ended up in Massachusetts, and she and I met through my internet radio show, which is still going on the voluntary internet station I run called Mushroom FM. It's called Mushroom FM because it's the home of the fun guys. And we met through there, and I was working for a weekend in Boston, and Bonnie would always send in these cool little emails. She writes very well, she's very articulate. So I knew she lived in Boston, and I said, would you like to come and co-host the show with me? Because I think it'd be fun to have you to kind of bounce ideas off. So she came and co-hosted the show, and that started a conversation that hasn't stopped.
And so she's been in New Zealand though for quite some time.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to understate the sacrifice that represents, because she had a career of her own and a network and everything, and my children were still pretty young then. She chose to come to New Zealand and basically give everything up to start a life, and it's amazing.
And you have 4 children?
Yeah, I have 4 children from a previous marriage, 2 boys and 2 girls, and they are all grown up now, and they're really cool people. I'm pretty chuffed that my oldest daughter, is an access technology consultant in New Zealand, making the country a more accessible place for blind people. And my oldest son is an audio engineer. So, you know, if ever he listens to any of my podcasts, he might give me a few handy tips. They're all great kids.
You learn from your kids too, and your grandkids.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a different, I'm sure you're aware, it's a different relationship now that they've grown up. You know?
Yeah.
And they're great people, and I just enjoy spending time with them as people. And every so often, they'll put me in dad mode and ask for advice or money, especially when they're trying to buy a house. But usually it's a really great relationship that we have, and I enjoy seeing them discover the world, and they've all got great significant others, and I'm proud of all of them.
And some of them have been over to visit, because you've been here about a year, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so, and some of them have been to visit since you've been here, since you got here.
Yeah, so we have a little bit of a budget where we bring the kids over for a visit.
I see.
And
Got it.
yeah, so it's nice to see them and to spend time. And in a way it works out okay, because we can give them concentrated, dedicated time while they're here. It works out really well.
Well, you told me you recently bought a house in Baltimore, and you said that you got it for a pretty good price, and so you were able to fix it up in special ways.
Yeah, so this is where we get a bit geeky, but I'll non-geekify it as much as possible. So, unfortunately, you know, with federal government layoffs and different changes that there've been, that does mean that property prices have declined quite a bit in our part of the world here in Baltimore, which is good news for home buyers like us. So we budgeted for an amount, and we didn't need as much as we thought we would to get a nice home. And so I started working with a home automation consultant. And that was a really interesting process, because at first he knew nothing about accessibility. He didn't really know how blind people used technology, but he was willing to learn, and for me to educate him and for him to learn in other ways. And we sat down and we thought, how can we build the automated home of my dreams? And without going into how we did it, because that's far too geeky, what I can say is, I mean, it's really practical stuff. If we say goodbye to the house in the morning, it gives us 60 seconds, then it locks the door and it sets the alarm and it turns off the lights and it turns off anything that was playing in the house. Bonnie, for example, can say, I want to watch CBS, and it knows where she set it from. So it will turn on the TV, it will set the TV to the cable box, it will tune the cable box to CBS, and then it will pipe CBS to the closest speaker from where she asked for CBS. So as a blind person, you know, even if she's not in the room where the screen is, she doesn't need to be, as long as she can hear CBS on the speaker.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so I mean,
so you don't need TVs in every room.
No, and so we have all the lighting controlled that way, and I mean, it just goes on and on. We have NPR coming on at 6 a.m. on specific speakers in the house at a specific volume.
And what about the thermostat? Is it working?
Yeah, it's all temperature controlled. I mean, and it's natural language, so even if Bonnie says something like, it's too cold in here, it interprets that and it will turn the temperature up. And
I see.
Yeah, and
well,
it knows
hopefully it's a good interpreter.
What's that?
Hopefully it's a good interpreter.
Yeah, it is pretty good. It's not perfect. It's not, but it is natural language.
You know, I can imagine AI thinking it was a refrigerator.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are still things that I want to automate. We haven't done the window shades and things yet.
See.
But it's really fun. It's been a fun project to work on, and somebody on Facebook.
But it's not going to be a museum.
Well, essentially, somebody on Facebook said you should sell tours of your house. You know, we will make a podcast episode out of it, though. We'll talk a bit about that.
Oh, that's great. Well, now you mentioned Facebook. That's what I wanted to end with. Is people can follow you on Facebook?
Sure, absolutely. You can search for my name, Jonathan Mosen, on Facebook.
And can you spell it?
Yeah, it's Jonathan, and Mosen is Mosen, and you can follow me there. I post from time to time. I'm not a voracious poster, but I post occasionally.
But you have interesting things on Facebook. Are there other places where people can follow you besides, well, I guess we should talk about Access On.
Well, yes, the Federation does produce a weekly podcast called Access On, and I'm a part of that. that showcases the latest in blindness technology and some of the advocacy around technology. So if you
Aren't
search...
you the host of it, wouldn't you say?
Sorry?
Are you the host of Access
I
On?
am hosting it, yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And if you search for Access On, and sometimes you might need to type Access On National Federation of the Blind in your podcast app, you should find it and you can subscribe to it. I'm also hanging out a lot on Mastodon, which is a social network that's kind of a federated open source social network. And I run a Mastodon instance called caneandable.social.
Oh.
It's like
Okay.
CANE
Yeah.
and able.social.
Okay.
And there's a lot of blind people on there.
And what about NFBRN?
So I helped to set that up, but our communications department runs that. NFBRN stands for the National Federation of the Blind Radio Network, and it's an internet radio stream. So you can ask your smart speaker or your smart assistant, I'm trying not to name it or it might trip the video, but you can ask the thing on your Apple device or whatever, play NFBRN. Sometimes you might want to say play NFBRN on TuneIn, and it should play it. And what you'll hear on there is a wide selection of articles, interviews, speeches from the National Federation of the Blind. And I tune into it quite a bit because it's quite uplifting.
When I tell my smart speaker, Open Nations Blind, I get NFBRN.
That's correct.
And
That's
I
a very
don't
good
if I
point.
say NFBRN.
Yes, so if you open Nations Blind, that's the skill that we have for Amazon type devices. Again, I'm trying not to trip it.
Right.
So if you use that magic word and tell it to open Nations Blind, it will do that. And the cool thing about that is that when there are live events, such as President Riccobono's releases, Presidential Release Live, or the National Convention, you'll hear it in that skill as well.
Uh-huh. All right, now, what should I have asked you that I didn't?
I think you were very thorough. I think you were.
We appreciate your time very much, and we appreciate your expertise and that you have decided to become part of the National Federation of the Blind in a very real way with this move.
It's an incredible honor to have been given the opportunity, so thank you.
Thank you.